Hello everyone, it's me, Gassique. Now listen, I'm going to talk you through what my music production workflow is from beginning to end, and hopefully there'll be something in there that you can take away. So let's get straight to it. Firstly, finding the song. Now I find it easier to grab a song from some of my old ideas than rather start afresh each time. Then when I do a bit of a jam or I sit down to see what comes up, then I'm focused just on that. And there's no pressure to think of something, and in one jam session, which could be 2 or 3 hours absolute maximum, then I like to come out of that with about 3 ideas, I guess. Now what does that actually mean? It could be a riff, it could be a melody, it could be an entire song that I've just come up with in that short space of time. But whatever it is, I don't sit down thinking, right, I'm going to record and write a song now. I just think I'm just going to jam, I'm just going to throw some things around and just see what I get out of it. And I find that way you're more in tune with what you are trying to do personally, and actually you become a lot more creative. So it's about finding that creative space into which you can experiment and you can try things out without actually having to have the pressure of coming up with a song at the end of it. When I'm finished, I will take the ideas that I like and I give them a name and I put them on Airtable, and then what I do is I actually rank them. So on my Airtable sheet there will be a bunch of ideas that I think are worth pursuing, and at the top of which I'll put the ones that I want to do next or that I think are the best. And I can actually put the audio file within that Airtable so I can listen to it immediately. I don't have to go and dig it out or anything like that. It's there, it's sitting there, and I can listen to it straight away. So when I feel ready to do a song, I'll take something from the top of that list or near the top of that list and I'll get to it. Now this is just for guitar-based music. Now for electronic music, I usually start from scratch and just play around to see what works, and I create a song from there. I don't go in necessarily with a riff or a melody or an idea. I just go with whatever sounds that I like and I'm experimenting with, and I just take it from there. That's the only time really when I sit down to think, I am now going to record a song right now, and that's with electronic music. With guitar-based music, I have to put a bit more thought into it and a bit more prep. Now that's not to say that electronic-based artists aren't doing that. That's just how I approach it. But for now, we're going to kind of concentrate on more guitar-based stuff. Now, if you don't have any ideas, then I would say make a space for yourself, somewhere quiet if you can get that, and just play around on a guitar, piano, whatever you play, and just see what comes up. Or alternatively, you can just listen to some music that reflects your mood and just see if there's anything that inspires you. And if it does, think about the chord sequences that they use, think about the parts that you like, parts that you don't like, the melodies around it, how the different instruments or different notes kind of match up. Maybe there's something that doesn't work, but it's quite interesting. And think about things like that. Think about how you would describe the sound of that music that you're listening to, that you're enjoying. Maybe it's dark, maybe it's bright. Think about how maybe they put that together. All these things, you can be critical about it, and it might actually help with the flow of the creativity that you're trying to tap into. So I'm a big David Lynch fan, and he would always say coming up with ideas is like fishing. You cast the rod into the flowing river and you see if an idea basically attaches itself. And sometimes if you go looking for it, then you probably won't find it. And I'm a believer in just getting into a state of mind, just seeing what comes out of the ether that you can actually pick up and you can create, rather than trying to be so pragmatic and so disciplined to a point where you're not allowing yourself to be open to what's around you and stuff that is trying to resonate from the universe. And that might sound really wanky, and that's because it is, but there's an element where I do actually believe in that. I do believe there's a meditative emptiness where sometimes things will just naturally flow into your brain that maybe you hadn't thought before because you're overthinking it. So really trying to kind of not go into these creative pursuits thinking, right, now I'm going to sit down and record a song. I don't think that's necessarily the best way to go. So I'm thinking of putting together a guide whereby it's literally step by step from pure basics to releasing a song to marketing the song, where everyone out there who's trying to be a musician and maybe feels like they're a bit stuck or they don't really know exactly what to do or they don't want to do anything wrong, that it gives them the inspiration to go out there and create it, because you can, and it's easy. So if you are interested, then please let me know. And make sure that you subscribe to the channel, because I will probably be going into more in-depth elements of all this, and you might find it extremely helpful. I hope so. So the next stage, you have your idea that you want to pursue. Now, this is actually the hard part. Some might think the conception part is hard. I don't think it necessarily is. I think that's something that you either have or you don't have, or that's a talent. But it's either you've got an idea or you haven't got an idea. And that is tough, but that's more of a natural thing. So hopefully you would have had a whole bunch of ideas and riffs and whatever it might be that you think, right, now here we go. What do I do with this? Good question. And here's the answer. And you're probably not going to like it. It's going to take a lot of work. And because it's the composition, you've got your idea or ideas, and now you want to turn them into a track. How do you actually do that? There's no right or wrong way, but I'll try and give you what I do, and then hopefully that might help. Now, the first thing I actually do is I actually have a listen to some of my other ideas and think, is there something where this could maybe smush together? And it doesn't even have to neatly smush together. Smush is the official word. Maybe it's completely different, and that's what you want to do, and you think maybe that would be interesting, you want to try it out, then go for it. There's no right or wrong way. But I think if you have a look at the other ideas that you've got, that you think there's an element here where maybe I can bring more of my previous work into it, then great, give it a go. Otherwise, you're starting with just that one hook or that one riff or that whatever it might be, chunk of a song that you've kind of got. So what I like to do is I make sure I remember how to play it firstly, which is actually quite crucial, and then I play it to myself, and then I start doing things around it. And I just make sure that I always use that main hook or that main idea as an anchor. So if I branch out and I'm trying like a different riff, or I'm going in a different chord progression or a different melody or whatever, and I'm like, okay, I've pushed it, and maybe I pushed it too far, come back, use it as an anchor, I come back to that main riff, and that reminds me of why I like the idea in the first place, what mood I'm going for, and that's it. And all I'm doing is I'm pushing out into different areas and different ideas and different notes or chords or whatever it might be. And then when I feel like it's gone too far or it's not working or I don't like it, I just bring it back and I go around and around and around, and then slowly you'll start thinking, yeah, that was pretty good, I quite like this was all right, maybe if I do something like this, and all of a sudden that's it, you're composing it. And also, it doesn't necessarily be like you've noticed from some of my songs, they're not necessarily like verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, end or whatever. Sometimes I'm just like, I kind of just want to repeat this bit for a while. Maybe I want to make it a bit of a drone. I'm not sure, because I feel like that's the way I want it to go. And that's what you should do. Like, a lot of people are so hung up on the idea of like verse, chorus, verse, that it becomes like an obsession. Like, okay, well that's done, now I move on to the chorus. Like, is it done? Maybe you could do a little bit here, a bit there. I remember like I was speaking to Rod Jones from Idlewild. I interviewed him a while ago, and we were talking about 100 Broken Windows, which is one of my favourite albums. And basically I was saying how like most of the songs are made up with almost little songs like they're little tiny riffs all put together to make like one song. So there's always like, and he was like, yeah, like you're right basically, but it's like there is the verse, but then there's always like a pre-chorus, and then there's a chorus, and there's like all these like pre-verse and these little bits which kind of bridge it to another element of the composition. And I thought that was quite interesting. And again, it kind of opens it up to be like, it doesn't have to go verse, chorus. Maybe it's verse, post-verse, pre-chorus. You know what I mean? Like, it could be anything. So you do it how you feel best. And to be honest, the more different it is, the better, in my opinion. And I think it's great to like try out different things and just see where you get to. But at the end of the day, you want to get however long it is, like 2 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, 8 minutes, whatever it might be, something that you feel like is completed, that you've basically tapped out whatever it was that was about that initial idea that kind of got you excited or that you thought was cool. You got to the end of it and you're like, I've tapped out all my options. I've kind of feel like I've journeyed across whatever this tapestry I've made here for myself is, and I've explored every corner, and now this is what I'm left with. And then you look at it and you think like, okay, well maybe get rid of this bit, like maybe that's no good, maybe that's an idea for the future, or maybe it's like these two can come together, and then all of a sudden you've got all these different bits and you're like, that's a song, I can make that as a song. And it doesn't necessarily mean like it's all on like the guitar or something like that, and you're thinking, okay, it's these chords. Sometimes I'm like, you know what would be really cool? Everything stops right here, and then it's like maybe it's like a drum solo or something like that, or like we come in and then it's just a bass for like whatever, like 4 bars or whatever, 20 seconds, whatever it might be, and you think, okay, cool, like that's that, and you start looking at it. But each of these stages you almost can't do at once. It takes that objectivity. And what I like to do is when I put down a song, I'll normally go away and I'll think about it, and I think maybe I could do this, maybe I could do that. sometimes when I'm walking to work or whatever it might be, I'll be like, oh, actually, you know what would be really cool is if like I did this or that, and the song is with me as I'm walking around, and I'm not trying to do everything all at that moment. It's kind of like living and breathing and evolving inside my head. And sometimes when I come back to it, I listen to it, and I'm almost looking at it at a different light, and I find that there's actually some ideas that I had just walking around that I can now put in. Or like maybe it's not that at all. Maybe it's the fact that it's like I've completely forgotten about the idea and I've come to it and I've been like, yes, I'm really excited about it again. And I always think if I'm going away from a piece of work or a song and I'm like excited about it still, and I'm humming it or I'm still thinking about it, I'm like, there's probably something good there. So I try and do that. But the idea is that you shouldn't get overwhelmed, because again, I feel like sometimes when I've got an idea, I'm like, I'm going to fuck it up. I'm going to ruin it in some way, shape or form. And maybe you will, but that's part of the trial and error of just being a musician, isn't it? Like the possibilities are literally limitless. They're completely overwhelming. But the idea is that it's whatever taps into you, because it's your perspective and you are 100% unique. So there is no right or wrong. The idea is if you've done it and it's come from you, then it's yours. And anyone could think whatever. They could think it's shit. They could think it's just awful, whatever it might be. But you know what? If you did it and you like it and you're happy with it, then great. But the main thing is that you enjoy the process, or you enjoyed it, at least at the time. I know people can get sick of their music or whatever it might be, then fine. But this is to benefit you, not for the end user, not for the audience, not for whoever. The idea is that you are sharing something that you have made, that you have created from your brain and your own talent. And if people love that, then great. And the idea is that there's people out there who probably have a similar perspective, who you can engage with and take from there. So yeah, once you're trying to put this song together, if you feel like it's not working or you're getting a bit bored of it, stop immediately and call it a day. You're done. You can come back to it, but what you want to make sure you don't do is you don't want to get sick of it, because then you'll probably never finish it. And all that time that you've spent so far has just been a waste. And who knows, you might want to put it into a drawer and leave it there for a year or something like that. And maybe you'll come back to it with a new perspective. Perhaps you hear a new sound since then, or something weird has inspired you about it suddenly that you didn't have before. Maybe you have another idea that you've had during that time that complements it really nicely. Just don't be put off. It's a marathon, it's not a sprint. So now you've got your composition, you've got your track. Congratulations, that is the hardest part in my opinion. And from here on in, it's an easy ride. Well, not really, but the next step is recording it. So you might be able to get a studio and a producer and all this, and I've only done that once in my entire life, and that was many years ago. And to be honest, it wasn't worth the money. The reason why is I was quite poor back then, and it was a lot to go into even a small studio in the East End of London, and the person doing it just couldn't give a toss. He must have looked at it and thought, like, this isn't really worth my time. And I'm trying to get the right sound and asking him questions, and unfortunately, like, he just wasn't into it. And I'd never done it before. I'd never been in a studio before, so I was super nervous as well. But yeah, unfortunately, that wasn't a great experience. So now, stepping back into music, I wanted to make sure that I had the ability to do it myself as much as possible, even if it meant being less skilled, which obviously I am. But it meant that I didn't have to rely on anyone else. I could do it in my time. I can work faster, cheaper for sure, and I can keep going until I feel like it's as close as what it feels or sounds like in my head as possible. So the following is what I do in my own little office studio space that you can see around me here. Now I have everything at hand and ready to go. Now that means I have the guitars where I want them. I've got a mic, I've got a mic stand, I've got cables, they're all ready to be set up. And if it wasn't for the fact that it looks quite unsightly, if I had them completely 100% set up all the time, then I'd have them mic'd up permanently. But as it is, they're all just at hand, ready to go. It takes me to get everything up and ready, not even 5 minutes. So when recording guitars, I try and do the same thing each time. I record directly from my amp, which is a Tone Master, and that's with one guitar. Then I record with a mic'd up amp, same amp, with another guitar, and that's using just a Shure SM58. And then I record directly into my Scarlett 2i2, so I can have a play on Amplitude if I need to, which is a software VST thing, which means that I can use their selection of amps and pedals and whatever they have, and I've got the completely dry signal going straight in, and I can play around with it on there. So in terms of vocals, I use this, my Shure SM7B. If it was good enough for Michael Jackson to use on Thriller, then it's good enough for me. And again, I put that into my Scarlett, my Focusrite Scarlett, which is a very simple, very small piece of equipment, and that goes into my MacBook. So what happens is I usually lay down my guitars first to a click, and then that's usually the whole composition locked in, and everything else can kind of grow around it. Whilst I'm doing that guitar, I make sure I record all the other bits of guitars that I've got to do, and that's it. My guitars by that point are done. This doesn't take me very long, because hopefully by that point I've practiced it enough, or I know what I'm doing enough, whereby the recording process is super easy. This is actually for me the easiest part, because I know exactly what I'm doing before I've even hooked everything up. So next up is the drums, and for that I use Superior Drummer, which is obviously a piece of software that simulates drums, and I think it's pretty good. So I either program it in myself. I've got a MPK, an Akai MPK Mini here, which has some pads, and I might do it like that, or I might write it directly into the grid, or I use what they have, which is Grooves, which is essentially like a little library of sounds that they have that are pre-recorded and sound pretty great, and I'll slap that on. But either way, I try not to take too long with it, and I use Grooves where possible, because for the most part they do the job. And again, it's about making it easy, it's about making it efficient, so that I can crank these out whenever I need to. Bass is next. I always DI this in, which means I go directly into my Scarlett, and I use Amplitude to find a nice heavy bass sound with a bass amp and some pedals, whatever I need. I'll normally listen to the guitar lines, and I'll have them loop over and over, and I'll play around on the bass until I find something I like. So I never actually go into a song or recording a song with the bass in mind. I'll always hear all the guitars first, have that all together, and then I'll just write the bass line around it. And I find that that's actually the best way for me to write the bass line. And for those, like, I always think, for me, it works best when it's doing something a little bit different from the guitar, complementing it, but making sure it's using the whole fretboard, not just following like the bass notes of whatever the guitar's doing. So I try and mix it up a little bit. I wouldn't say I'm that good on bass. I sound competent. But yeah, there's been times where like I've had friends do a bass line, and I would never be able to think of that. And that's great. And that's really good. But it's funny because I do enjoy the bass, but you're essentially like coming up with the real hooky, catchy elements without having to do like full chords. Then I'll do the vocals. What I normally do is I do 5 or 6 takes. I try not to do any more than that. I usually completely discard the first 2 takes anyway, and then I'll comp the best lines or chunks together to make one main vocal track. Then what I'll normally do is I'll loop that, and I'll sing over the top of it and try and find a harmony if it needs it, or perhaps I'll double it up if I think it needs it, or if I think it's a little thin, or sometimes just have the one vocal line, which I think is a lot more personal, a lot more raw, and put that together. And then lastly, I do the synth. Now, mainly it's because it's more of a checkbox and not a necessity usually when I'm doing guitar-based music. But I like to make sure that right at the end, I just have a look around and I see if there's anything that I think, well, maybe that would be nice here or there, or just give it a little bit more texture or another hook perhaps. But normally this is just more of a playtime. I don't necessarily go in with anything in mind. And because I'm not in a proper studio, I don't have to worry about phasing or anything like that. So once the recording's finished, it's now time to go into the mix. So to make sure that my mixing is the most efficient it can be, because normally this is the most time-consuming area of the process for me anyway, I have a template that I use that has a lot of my EQ, compressors, etc. ready to go for different instruments, which means I just drag in the audio tracks, and then I have a bass point to start with that I can then tweak from there. And that might upset some of the purists out there, but for me it does save me a lot of time, and I do highly recommend it. The problem is that I'm still learning with mixing, so I find that this, even though it's the hardest part for me, it's also the most constructive, and it's also the thing I enjoy the most, because I like being able to manipulate the sounds, and I like learning new things, and I feel like I'm constantly learning when I'm mixing my own stuff. Another note is that at any one point, I try not to do it for too long. I do it for 2 to 3 hours, absolute max, and then stop. And that's because you get something called ear fatigue, which is basically you get sick. You're not even listening to the same song anymore. Your ears have got used to it, and it's more about trying to step away and coming back to it fresh. And weirdly, you'll notice that sometimes it sounds like a completely different song. Even though you've not changed anything, it's just your ears have basically hit a new reset button and you're coming at it fresh again. If it's starting to sound finished, then what I'll do is I'll normally export it as it is. I'll listen to it on my headphones. I'll make sure I take time to listen to it in the car, and get a sense of where I think the faults are, and I'll be a bit more critical. And that's just kind of in between the mixes. If I have the time, I don't kind of make sure I'm listening to it on repeat. Just like if I'm walking to work or whatever it might be, I'll stick it on and have a listen, and then maybe I'll listen to it again on the way back and see, right, well, there's something here or something there, or maybe I could have done whatever here. And I just keep going until it's done and I feel like it's mixed and it's mastered, and then it's ready to go. Now, once the song's finished, I'll make sure that I export it as both a WAV and an MP3. I'll go into Midjourney and Canva. I'll create a cover for it, again using templates where needed. Canva, for instance, has its own like branding kit, which means it always uses the same font and color schemes if needed, which is helpful, although my stuff's mostly like black and white, but still. And once that's done, I use DistroKid to put it up to release in at least 1 week, usually 2 weeks time, and I wait for it to get to Spotify. Now, to get onto Spotify usually takes a couple of days, so in the meantime I make sure that I'm still busy. I'll put it up on Submit Hub so that that's done, and they update you once it gets closer to the release date to make sure the Spotify link is the same, etc, etc. But then that side of it is all done, and it gives you a chance to create some more hype beforehand as well. I will also make sure that I get everything onto my Airtable as one source of truth. This has my ISRC codes, my cover art, my files, and I'll make sure once it's on Spotify that I have my Spotify deep link in there, which I'll come on to another time. And then I use ChatGPT to help me write up a bit of a press release. Once that's done, I'll put a blog up on my website, Gassique.com, and I will also release the song as it is on my Patreon for paid members. Now, I can either do a music video, and I've been using AI like Kling to create my music videos. There's like lyric videos, people do a lot of that, or they just have the artwork, or maybe they manipulate the artwork slightly and loop it so there's something kind of going on. But if you don't have time, then that's fine. But if I do have one, I make sure I schedule it for release day, and all the hashtags are SEO friendly, etc., just to make sure that once it's released, it's ready to go. Now, once it's on Spotify, which is usually just a day or two, I'll make sure I pitch it to the Spotify playlist with my amended press release as well. And I'll create my Canva, which is using either DistroKid, or I usually now make my own ones, again with AI. And what I normally do is I turn my cover art into like a moving piece. And I think it's 10 seconds is the max. So it's just something very small, very slight, but makes it a bit more interesting. And I do that with Kling. And then I'll release a Spotify pre-save campaign through Hyped, which actually gives the song away as a download to those that sign up. And usually I start the budget at about £5 or £6 a day, but of course that's completely up to you. If I have a music video here, then I can create my own little clip to use as part of that ad campaign, which is quite useful. And then I can also put that as a YouTube short or a TikTok just to get more hype going. So I make sure I can kind of use it across different formats. But otherwise, use Hyped, get that pre-save going, and hopefully people start signing up. I'll also make sure that I put out my newsletter, which you can sign up to on the site, again, Gassique.com, and that'll update everyone with the release date and anything else that's kind of going on so that people know to look out for the song once it's out. Then, using Canva or whatever platform, I try and batch produce clips and schedule them to come out across the week or 2 weeks. And then that way it's completely automated. I don't have to worry about doing it each day. It's all just scheduled to go. Now, once that song's out, I use Hyped again to make sure that I am creating a Spotify playlist campaign, which I can come on to another time. But essentially what it does is you're promoting the song using meta ads, and then it links people to the song on your own playlist. So it's not just going to a random track next, it's continuing to play your music. So you're basically having a compounding effect on all your streams. I highly recommend doing that. And to be honest, once that's done, that's it. I leave it. Also, if you have got a music video, I run it on Hyped as well, so that it runs it as a Google ad and it plays it on YouTube advertising so that people are watching the video on YouTube as well. So yeah, that's it. That's more of a general overview. Now I'm planning to release a bit of a cheat sheet or a guide. So if you think that's helpful, then please do comment. And as I said before, I want to make sure that DIY musicians out there who don't have necessarily the time or the budget, and maybe they're trying to do this as more of a side hustle but trying to gain a bit more traction, or they just want to feel like they want to be creative and they want to kind of get some of their music out there that they've never felt like they've been able to do before. Whatever it is, you can absolutely do it, and there's nothing standing in your way. You can do it as cheap or as expensive as you want. And I know that there's an element where it's like you have to support the music industry by making sure you hire like engineers, producers, studios and things like that. But the long and short of it is, I can't afford it. I know there's a lot of people out there who also can't afford it. And so the only option they have is to do it themselves. And I would say, please go for it. If that's the thing that's stopping you because you think it's too expensive, then that's a shame, because people deserve to hear your music. Your music is you. Even if everyone else hates it or whatever it might be, even if you feel like no one's going to get it or it's too weird or experimental, I guarantee you there'll be people out there who will listen to it. And end of the day, like, it depends why you're doing it. For me, it's not about the validation or anything like that. I love making music and I enjoy it when it resonates with people. That's what I enjoy. It's not about being popular. I want to be able to find that crowd or find that fan base who feel the same way I do, or just enjoy the kind of music or sounds that I'm making and enjoy the process as well that kind of goes behind it. And the only way you're going to make those people aware is the marketing, because a lot of people are like, oh, well, you're spending money on the marketing and yet you're not spending it on a producer or whatever. And the problem is that I feel like there's something that I can do, which is I can try and learn how to mix. I can go on YouTube, I can try these things out. And there's something I can't do, which is market myself properly. I can't do it, and I don't really know the best way to do it, because I would just be screaming. It's like an old man screaming at the cloud kind of thing. It's like the only way, and I've learned this the hard way, where you will actually get listens and you can actually make a living out of it, is to market your music. And it's not selling out, and it's not throwing money in the bin. What you're doing is you're investing in yourself, you're investing in your music. And with all the stuff, all the guitars, all the whatever that I've got surrounding me, I would be like, if I need to like sell off stuff that I don't need and make my, sell off a couple of guitars or whatever and put that towards marketing, I would do that, because that is more of an investment and I'll get more back from that than I would do it just sitting there gathering dust. So it's completely up to you. But I would say that actually taking the time and making sure that you budget out more for your marketing, then great. I think that when people ask like how much, it's completely up to you. But for instance, when I use Hyped It, that's the minimum of £4 a day. And I think, okay, like I can afford that for however long. I think that's like, whatever. Like if I went and bought, I know people say like, oh, it's like a cup of coffee a day, which it is. And that's fine. So if I have to cut out a cup of coffee a day, I don't drink coffee anyway, so it's fine. Then I can put that money towards marketing it. Now people look at it accumulate and thinking, oh God, that's, a fair amount. Just stop when you need to stop. As long as you've kind of got a little bit and you've started getting it going, then that's what matters. It doesn't matter necessarily that it's like, oh, I haven't got like £1,000 to spend on the marketing this one track. Yeah, that's fine. It's fine. You start small and get bigger. And the thing is that you'll soon find that once you start getting the listens and people start engaging with it and all this, you'll be like, oh, okay, maybe I'll up it a little bit more, or maybe I'll try and do this. And then all of a sudden, you've got a whole thing snowballing. You've got a whole thing going. So at the end of the day, if you're making music and you're not marketing it and you're just giving it to your friends and family, they are going to be the only ones that listen to it. And that's fine if that's what you want. But if you are genuinely thinking, I want to make music and I want people to hear it, then you have to get it in front of people for them to be able to hear it. And that's not selling out, that's just common sense. And the great thing is that you now have a variety of very easy options where you can do this for relatively cheap. I would say like £4 a day isn't crazy. I think Google Ads is even less if you wanted to do that. It's not a huge amount of money, and even slowly across time, you're still getting something back because people are now being aware of your music. So I would say go for it. Well, that's it for today. So please do subscribe, like, comment, and get back to me on what you thought of all this. There's probably a lot of stuff I missed out, and I'll probably do an update video down the line. And as I said, I want to get a cheat sheet. I want to get a guide together that will help DIY musicians out there. But hopefully some of you found this useful. You can check me out on legassique.com. My handles are all legassique. See what's up there. All right, thanks everyone. See ya.